What is up, wrestling fans, and welcome to the September edition of 2001 A Wrestling Odyssey. And joining me, as per usual, on this trip back in time is Robert D. Felice.
Boy, this year is just flying by, huh, Callum?
I'm just remembering, I don't actually introduce myself on these ones. I usually just lead into saying you, and I don't even say, I'm Callum Wiggins. If you're not familiar with me by now, then you haven't been watching the Smack Talk podcast for the last 2 or 3 years.
He's Callum Wiggins. He's a surefire pick for host of the year for the Smark Out Moment Awards this year.
Yeah, you can take the co-host one while I take the host. And Tony can get nothing for all the hard work that he puts
in. That sounds about fair.
Yeah, I mean, that's usually the way it works with him. Anyway,
yeah.
Now that little bit of admin is out of the way, we'll move on to the actual show itself. So September 2001, in terms of months that have happened, it's probably the most pivotal for a completely different reason since about March or April time when WCW and ECW died.
This is probably less wrestling related and more just the scope of the world changing in September of 2001.
And we'll definitely get into talking a bit more about that in a little bit of time, but usually we start off with the Reheated Tags, where we go back over the news and events that took place over this time. I'm going to break a little bit from the norm with this edition to talk a little bit more about the TV at the time, because that will lead on to our first show review. Start really with, remember how last month we noted how many title matches took place on Raw and SmackDown? Well, September is no different. 19 title matches on Raw and SmackDown alone.
Good lord.
That does not count any of the matches that we watched on Unforgiven, which we'll also be covering a little later on. This resulted in 5 total changes, with Tajiri defeating Canyon for the US title, Kurt Angle winning the Hardcore Championship from RVD and then losing it immediately afterwards, because that's pretty much what the Hardcore title was there for. The Dudley Boys winning the WWF Tag Team titles from Kane and The Undertaker. And then by the end of the month, Booker T and Test had defeated Kane and The Undertaker for the WCW Tag Team Championships.
Not a good month for Undertaker and Kane.
No, and I'm pretty happy with that situation, based on what's been happening over the past couple of months or so. Another piece of interesting storyline development was it was a lot of subjects surrounding RVD this month. So RVD was a big focal point.
He was the first guy from the Alliance, really the only, to get over, and they start capitalizing on that huge this month.
Yeah, I would say so, with RVD defeating Steve Austin on an episode of SmackDown. Main event episode just pins him fairly clean. It's one of those matches where you're supposed to be getting the guy over, but realistically the other guy takes about 90% of the match, and so it doesn't work as comprehensively as it could do. But it's still RVD getting a victory over Steve Austin, cementing himself as one of the top stars, so that's good.
Yeah, that is, and probably one of the only one-on-one matches they would have.
But the bigger story was surrounding RVD and Stephanie McMahon, because there were talks in place for Stephanie McMahon and RVD to start a romance angle, which you can see pretty clearly through the TV and watching Unforgiven and everything along those lines, that Stephanie was playing to be into RVD and using that she recognised him being one of the Alliance's top stars and wanted to attach herself to him.
So this goes a little further down the line, as Jericho would actually say he pitched an idea to have him tell Triple H, hey, your wife is cheating on you with RVD, and then actually have it be Jericho, and that would be the lead-in for them to fight at WrestleMania, along with the fact that, well, Jericho was there when he tore his quad.
That would be... I think there was something there's a lot of truth to that.
I believe Triple H just said, no, you're not gonna make out with my real life girlfriend on TV, and that was it.
Well, it's actually quite interesting, because the reason why this angle was nixed was on RVD's side as opposed to Stephanie or Triple H's side.
Well, he didn't like doing that stuff either, right?
Well, no, because RVD and his wife in particular was pretty I don't want to say jealous, but wasn't exactly keen with the idea of Stephanie McMahon being all flirty with her husband, especially when we know how things can shift in terms of wrestling behind the scenes relationships.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair, don't you?
Oh yeah, I would say so. Bruce Pritchard talks about this on it's Something to Wrestle With podcast at one point, just talking about how Rob was concerned with the angle and said that Vince would basically went along with the idea and says we make movies that he's just playing a character, it's not real, he's just an actor. But Rob and Rob's wife weren't keen on the idea.
Well, okay, he's just an actor and we make movies, but how many co-stars don't hook up and leave their longtime partners? Because, oh, I did a movie with such and such and we hooked up.
Yeah, absolutely. Just Jennifer Aniston could tell you all about that stuff.
Yeah.
But so that was one of the big stories of RVD rising up the ladder. We also had some shifts between the Alliance members. Tori Wilson was gradually defecting from the Alliance by forming a relationship with Tajiri on screen.
Lots of romance this month.
Yeah. Well, we had something which I don't know whether you can count it as romance, but on the last episode of SmackDown of the month, Molly Holly was in a match with Ivory, where they clashed heads in the middle of the ring. It was the storyline. It wasn't like that wasn't intentional or anything along those lines. But what happened is that Hurricane comes down, and he had been looking for a sidekick all month long, and so he takes Mighty Molly out of the ring, unconscious, carries her to his Hurricycle, and whisks her away into the night.
Yes.
And then the next week she comes back and she's Mighty Molly, his trusted sidekick.
My favorite Mighty Molly moment, because we'll never talk about them again, is WrestleMania 18, where she's like, to the Hermobile, and he spins around and she hits him with a frying pan, and that's how she becomes the hardcore champion for about 5 seconds until Christian slams a door in her face.
Yeah, that was. It's quite funny that the only good thing you remember about her time as Mighty Molly was the end of her being Mighty Molly.
Yeah.
I just think it's a little bit, you know, it strikes me a lot like the Triple H Stephanie McMahon drugged in the back of a car type situation. Like just taking an unconscious woman, driving away with her, and next week she comes back and she's your like sidekick slash. I don't think they didn't strike this as like having a romantic relationship, but that was still it was kind of implied.
Well, I mean, what are you implying, Callum? Are you saying the Hurricane did something?
They don't do listen. WWE do a lot of things, but they don't do rape, as we've entirely as they've spoken about in many times before.
Well, yet we wouldn't get to Heidenreich until about 2004.
No, but instead in '99 we got how many times do you think we consummated the marriage? That's the expression. But I wanted to talk about another thing of the ending of the September the 3rd episode of Raw, which was a complete and total debacle, essentially. So what happened was the closing of the show was going to be Angle had kidnapped Austin in his new truck and sped off towards the Don River in Toronto, Canada. And I think it was Toronto. But it doesn't really matter too much. But essentially, they were driving towards that place at 10:57. So 10:57, the shows usually run on Raw at that point in time from 9 to 11. So 3 minutes until the end of the show, they've just decided to him driving off, and they're going to come back after the commercial break and do an overrun, as they typically did at this point in time.
Okay.
But what happens is the guy running the satellite assumes that because the commercial's gone on 10:57, the transmission's over, and he just cancels the transmission. So,
oh my god, that's awful.
So it just cuts off to just like minutes and minutes and upon minutes of adverts. And also the fans, because they had clocked this and they'd seen this angle and had realised they'd gone to commercial, had started filing out of the building because they thought the show was over as well. And this would be resolved on SmackDown or something along those lines. So Lillian Garcia had to get on the microphone to announce to everyone that the show wasn't over and to get back into their seats because there was more still to come.
Huh.
Just
that is an odd hiccup from WWE in 2001.
So, what the show closing angle was supposed to be was Angle had blindfolded and tied Austin's by a chain to some bricks and was threatening to throw him over the bridge into the river because Austin on the previous edition of SmackDown had thrown Kurt Angle's medals into a river as well. And this was so Angle could get a title shot at Unforgiven by convincing Austin, like, I'll throw you into the river if you don't give me what I want, and Austin agrees to it.
This is the worst Stone Cold Steve Austin angle. Out of everything they did with him in 2001, out of everything they did with him, this is the worst. He's Stone Cold, and you've got him crying, handcuffed, and begging for his life.
Well, yeah, but this is a completely different Austin. Once you accept that this Austin is completely different from the old Stone Cold Steve Austin, then I think it's quite funny and well done, really. Because Angle just throws him into a kiddie pool.
Yep.
Right. And that's just, say what you want about heel Austin, it definitely killed their business. It definitely lost a ton of money that they could have made in 2001, but it was fucking hilarious in many situations. He was a good heel.
He was a fine heel, but this should have... If you accept that this is not canon, then, it's okay.
I think we should also do a little bit of talk about... I wanted to mention this before moving on to Tough Enough. DDP. We haven't seen much of DDP since that beating he took at SummerSlam. He didn't appear until really the final couple of weeks of September, and this is when he comes back in his yoga instructor gimmick. His motivational speaker, it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing, that type of character. Completely opposite to this creepy stalker gimmick that he had beforehand.
And completely more in line with who he is as a person. But this is... DDP in the WWF is such a failure.
Oh yeah,
it's unfortunate, but it's so bad.
I just don't think that they saw much potential in. They maybe... I can only speak from my own personal thoughts into it, but I just think they saw him as, so he appealed to the WCW market, but he won't appeal to our fans. He's too much of a throwback.
I don't understand how they could be so blind to certain things like that. DDP was a megastar in wrestling. He wrestled with Jay Leno and with Hulk Hogan. He did a lot of mainstream things. Why wouldn't they take advantage of that?
Because he wasn't their guy. And if you're not a WWF guy, then you're pretty much worthless. You have to start from the ground up. And there are certain things to like about the not a bad thing, it's a good thing DDP gimmick. Again, it's one that's got a lot of humour value towards it, but it wasn't going to ever cement him as a top star again.
Yeah.
Couldn't take him seriously. With the
almost like Austin crawling out of a kiddie pool in chance. Can't take it seriously.
No. But going back to what we're going to talk about with Tough Enough, there isn't really too much to discuss because this is the penultimate month before next week we crown Maven and Nidia as the winners of the first season of it. But there was a promo segment by Maven, of all people, that caught a lot of people's attention in one of the last few episodes where they went on tour with the WWF crew to a couple of pay-per-view and live events, just so they could take a sight of the atmosphere and see what it was like, what they would be performing in front of. And they went backstage and they all had to cut promos, and Maven's was head and shoulders above everybody else's.
Makes sense, he won the...
Oh yeah. It makes sense at the time because a lot of people talk about on Tough Enough Maven's just charisma and his good backstory and everything along those lines, but it never ever translated onto him being a wrestler. I just don't know where that went.
Because I think it's once you get involved in it and then it's you're playing a character, so you become less of yourself and more of alright, I'm trying to create a wrestling character, and that's where the disconnect is.
I think, yeah, partially that. I also think that part of it is that his gimmick was he's the new guy and he's the Tough Enough winner, and they never expanded on that.
Yeah, I think he did get to headline a Survivor Series once, but even with that, it wasn't alright, you're getting a push. It was just, okay, you're gonna headline Survivor Series, and then you're gonna in the next month turn heel and wrestle for the IC title and then go away.
I have a feeling that, I might be completely wrong about it, but when in that like 4-on-4 tag team match, I have a sneaky suspicion that Edge was supposed to be where Maven was, but the crowd turned him heel because they found out about the Lita Matt Hardy situation in the lead into it.
I think Edge on that side makes so much more sense. So what do you just do? Put Flair in Edge's spot?
Yeah, or they
Yeah,
probably could have found another heel for it.
I guess that's fine. Yeah.
Like the only other option would have been to, I think Kane was injured at the time, so they couldn't put him because of the Snitsky. Because Snitsky was on one side, so you wouldn't put Kane on the other. That would make sense.
Right.
But yeah, Maven was just, I think, just a filler role for somebody else that they would have rather had.
Yeah, and he, like we said, he never did amounted to anything. I think Nydia did great for her time in the WWF.
Oh yeah, for what she managed to accomplish with Jamie Noble, that pairing was like gold for a couple of years, really. Once she
That was
separated
good.
once she separated away from Noble, her days were numbered essentially.
Yeah. Cause
But
what did she even do after her angle with Noble?
she went on Raw during the draft that Bischoff and Heyman did. So she
Okay.
went on Raw. She took her shirt off to change the Raw to SmackDown to the Raw one.
And she was never seen again.
No, well, essentially she formed a tag team with Victoria for a little while.
Oh, okay. That's kind of cool, I guess. I don't remember anything of her beyond Jamie Noble.
No, she was gone by the end of 2004, early 2005, around about that time.
Man.
But we're leading to like the big topic of our TV discussion, which is our first review, which is the September 13th edition of SmackDown. A very different episode than most people was probably expecting from this one, from the Compaq Center in Houston, Texas. So this occurred 2 days after the tragedy of 9/11. Rob, you were living in New York at the time.
I was literally living in New York. It was mass hysteria. People thought it was World War III. Uh, it was just crazy for a good, I would say, 2 months. Like nobody wanted to do anything. Everybody was afraid to send their kids to school. I remember, like Halloween was completely canceled. Nobody wanted to do trick or treating or anything like that. This shut down and paralyzed not only New York but so much of the country. It forever changed how we fly. It forever changed so many things, and it was a oddly sobering time, especially to be like a little kid during this.
Yes, so I don't have a lot of immediate memories of 9/11 because I wasn't in the country. I was about 9 or 10 when it happened. So it doesn't resonate with me. I've gone back and watched documentaries and read articles about this, and this is the most pivotal news story of the millennium so far, I'd probably say.
Yeah, and I would still say like it shaped the rest of our lives, like
Well,
we're always going to be that generation that grew up in the post 9/11 world.
and that's exactly it. People always talk about there was a world before 9/11 and there's a world after 9/11. And I think that rings true as much as
Definitely.
anything else. So WWE obviously was meant, or WWF, should I say, still in 2001, need to get that mindset in, was meant to have an episode of SmackDown on the September 11th, but cancelled that show and instead returned on Thursday. Well, essentially, they were meant to do a taping on Tuesday for the Thursday night SmackDown. Instead, they decided to rent out the building again to do a live edition of SmackDown on the 13th. And it was pretty much in the same vein as what you'd expect, what you've seen from the Owen Hart tribute show and what you'd later see from the Eddie Guerrero tribute shows. A very different thing where the message is about supporting this person as opposed to what the actual storylines or events that were taking place in the ring.
Yeah, it was a very America first kind of atmosphere, and
Or you don't say.
a lot of touching tributes from people. I think Jericho said something along the lines of like, "Oh man, it really makes me mad and it makes me want to enlist." And The Rock said touching words, and Stephanie McMahon said words.
We'll get into a lot of these ones because there were essentially it was built around a couple of nothing matches which were just there to entertain the live crowd, and 28 interview segments between a mixture of wrestlers, behind the scenes crew, just people from the Houston area that were either in the military or major business owners, that type of thing.
I know. I believe Bruce Pritchard in his SmackDown After 9/11 podcast said that he was able to speak to somebody within the Bush administration because they happen to be there. Well, not there, but like, the Bushes are from Texas, and I think that they were able to get in contact with somebody like that. That says, how big the WWF was. I'm not sure how true this is, but they maintain that they were the first live televised event to go on after 9/11.
Really? I don't think they ever mentioned it on the episode of. Literally, they said it over and over. That's.
Well,
I'm not. I'm not against them doing this show. I think the reasons for doing it, I think, for the most part, were pure and for the reasons they suggested it to be. But very much part of it was trying to get a big rating and trying to show that they were the best ones because they were the ones willing to stand up where other people weren't. That type of thing. I think there was a lot of self-serving with the WWF doing this on this day.
But there always is. And like you said, nothing against them doing this show, but I think it's one of those events that in hindsight, because you've seen this like regurgitated verbiage of, oh, look at us, that it sours it watching it back because you're like, okay, we get it. You're great people. You're doing a great thing. Please stop putting yourselves over.
I don't want to really go through a blow-by-blow breakdown of the show because we've already got another more comprehensive review of Unforgiven to come up. But I want to mention a few bits and pieces. The Vince McMahon promo to start the event is probably one of the key things to point out. McMahon saying things like, "Tonight, the spirit of America lives here in Houston, Texas," very much clearly stating that this is the first public assembly of its size since Tuesday. Talking about this is sending a message to terrorism that America won't live in fear. Or they're a proud people with a proud spirit. I want to bring up something here that the man says. I'll also bring up more in the other speeches. He explicitly says the phrase "We will fight." Now,
I
know
believe Vince McMahon is that much of a patriot, though. Like Vince, I genuinely believe feels like, well, you can't knock down America, and yeah, we're gonna get up and we're gonna fight. And I feel like he might, if it came to it, if he had to, enlist at that time or any time beforehand, I feel like he might have.
I think there's a fine line between being a patriot and being. I don't really know how to describe it, but a level of like extra patriotism, which is beyond the point of thinking you can be proud of your country, and then there's a level of people thinking that you are the biggest country and how dare someone else affront you by doing this to your country. I just feel like that's overstepping the line a little bit. I think Lance Storm says in one of his speeches that this is an attack on the world, it's not just an attack on America. And I think people that time weren't able to see that. They just thought, oh, this is the world going against America because America's the greatest and we're not going to suffer this. That type of thing. Rather than saying this is a major attack by a terrorist organization that could have attacked any country. They decided to attack America because America is the biggest. It does have the biggest platform. The Twin Towers were two monumental structures. So it does make sense they went for this approach. But I just feel like it gets a little bit lost in the idea of we will fight, we'll tear these people limb from limb. That sort of rhetoric is a little, especially when you know how much suffering the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan have caused.
Okay, and we won't get too into the weeds here, but I think a lot of it is just that bravado that we immediately projected. Like George Bush came on TV shortly after and was like, they tried to break the spirit of America and they have failed. You know, they're gonna see that we're stronger. It's just a lot of that rah rah speech, and it's a good speech, but it really, like you said, we got so wrapped up in the America thing that you missed the fact that this could have happened to any country in the world.
I think part of it as well is the fact that this is only 2 days after it. The emotions are still raw. The feelings are still very much in the atmosphere. It's not that they've had the chance to like give 2 weeks to reflect on it, to think about it a little bit more clearly. And I understand that some people are going to take a more aggressive, immediate attitude towards it. I just feel, especially on a platform as big as SmackDown was at the time, this rhetoric of fighting these people and going against these people, when people were pretty clear, or at least I assume early on in the time were pretty clear that this were terrorist attacks performed by the Taliban or Al Qaeda.
No, they knew right away that it was Al Qaeda, and
Yeah.
right away Muslim Americans. That's another completely separate but just as big backlash that happened where right away they were ostracized.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think this kind of rhetoric on a platform as big as SmackDown was going to help their cause in any way.
Yeah, but it's hard to, at the time, how were they going to say, all right, we're all mad, but let's remember, it's.
I understand that bit of it. I know it's, especially so early on, it wasn't going to be so much more nuanced in the idea of like accepting, not so much accepting this, but trying to balance their thoughts and their feelings about this situation. I'm totally understanding of that. I understand I understand why that's like why they had these messages and they had these attitudes. I just don't think it's helpful, because you're spreading these same feelings of anger and vengeance almost onto more people, and those
I
people and those people can be susceptible to that type of conditioning.
I agree.
So McMahon gives his big speech. I thought it was an interesting touch that when all the wrestlers and backstage crew come out onto the ramp and the stage to listen to Lillian Garcia sing the national anthem, which I thought she performed excellently.
Yeah, she's fantastic.
That they had the WWF guys come out first, and then the Alliance guys were all on the stage. Just a weird level of, even on this show, they had to have some kind of storyline continuity.
Well, I mean, looking at it with 2019 eyes, that's refreshing.
Oh yeah, exactly. But it's just, it just feels a bit odd, really. Like that they wanted to go to that level of after this tragedy. That okay, but can't have the WWF and Alliance guys interact too much.
That would never happen today, which is crazy. They
No.
would never bother to maintain the lines of kayfabe that much.
I don't really mind it as much nowadays because kayfabe is so much. I don't want to say it was much more open now than it was in 2001, because kayfabe was dead way before 2001. But I don't really mind it when it's at the start of the show, because you kind of feel like that's just a precursor before the actual action starts. It's more the ones like when they were announcing the Evolution card or anything along those lines, where everyone just breaks character towards the end of the show and just all start hugging and praising each other. It's that type
Yeah,
of thing.
we're in a time where if they started rolling credits after Raw or SmackDown, it wouldn't feel out of place.
So might as well give a little allude to some of the matches before we go into the speeches, because they're more where the meat of the show is. The matches are just a nothing mismatch of just like short sprints to just try and keep the crowd happy. So the Hardy Boys defeat the Hurricane and Lance Storm.
Yeah,
RVD squashes Spike Dudley pretty comprehensively.
that's fair.
Christian, the new heel, separated Christian with the operatic music, took on Chris Jericho, ended with Chris Jericho just rolling up Christian.
Oh, Christian.
We had a Rock promo segment which led to him issuing an open challenge, which Sean Stasiak answered. As if you've been watching any of the 2001 Sean Stasiak stuff, you probably know how it goes. He gets tossed over the rope 2 or 3 times, comes into the ring. Rock makes a gay joke about how he likes strudel. Basically causes Stacey Keibler to like get weaker than knees from all the way up in the stage just by talking to her, and then pins Stasiak in 3 seconds. Pretty standard stuff for The Rock at this point in time.
I guess that would make the crowd happy. Like, I'm a very in-ring first kind of guy, so I think nowadays they would have had Austin fight Rock, and they would have been like, never forget your troubles, here's the biggest wrestling match we can probably give you, you know?
Oh, we might talk about a little bit more about Rock Austin in some of our reheated tags, but just to finish off the matches here, we had X-Pac and Albert lost to the APA because, of course, Bradshaw was on that too. I'll definitely be talking a lot about Bradshaw with speeches. Booker T defeated the Big Show because Booker T was being built up for the match with The Rock at Unforgiven.
Wasn't Big Show like fresh off a run in Ohio Valley?
No, that was that's finished at the start of 2001 when he came back in the Royal Rumble. That was after his stint in Ohio Valley Wrestling because he'd gone to OBW to train up a little bit and to lose weight, and he came back even fatter than ever. But but that's just the way it goes, I guess, with Big Show. Lita and Ivory had an okay match. Lita won that one. Test and the Dudleys defeated William Regal's cheered Scotty Hottie, which included a fantastic. I don't think it was a botch, but if it was, then it's even more hilarious. Of Scotty Hottie bouncing on the bottom rope for a tag to William Regal and falling off the apron. I assume that was intentional, but it was great. Whatever it was. And then the best match of the show, which was Rhino against Kurt Angle, the only one which really was given a decent amount of time to tell a good story. Kurt Angle even kicked out of the Gore because
which wasn't done a lot.
No, they were building him up to be like the big top babyface at this point in time, and he was the patriotic hero on this show, so he kicked out of the Gore, and then then pinned out Rhino following the Angle Slam. Gets the mic, starts a USA chant, and they go off the air with the Olympic hero celebrating with the crowd. Which I guess is the right way of ending it.
Very appropriate.
Yeah. But the meat of the show was the speeches being delivered by people. Now, I've written up like little reviews of all of them, but I don't want to cover all of them because a lot of them, they give their condolences, they say what they need to say in this situation, but they don't really go into too much detail. Like, I don't really mind too much what like Tori Wilson or Canyon was saying about this thing, but there are a few of them that I think need to be covered in a little bit more depth. I want to start with Chris Jericho's one.
Sure.
Because Jericho, I think, is on the complete opposite end of the spectrum to Vince McMahon and a few other people that we're going to be listening to. In the idea, he talks about 9/11 as an opportunity for people like across the world to become more peaceful as a nation and in the human race in general. Like, he talks about people wanting to like hug their loved ones that little bit harder because you never know what's around that corner. Be kind to strangers, that type of thing. So he's expressing this.
Good guy, Jericho.
Yeah, he's expressing this as an opportunity for peace.
A little bit of the bubbly, you know. That deserves a little bit of the bubbly. Chris Jericho's fantastic.
I want to talk about Ivory as well. So Ivory talks about how she doesn't want the children of America to grow up judgmental or afraid of these people, because then expresses the idea that there are far more good people in the world than bad people. And that what makes America great is the number of beliefs and creeds and the freedom to express themselves in whatever way they choose. And that is what's important in America. Those are the messages and the issues they should be defending. Which
so
I thought
can I vote Ivory in for president?
I would. I mean, she would talk a lot because she does talk quite a bit, but I think that sort of message is one that we should be professing quite a lot more. But the issue is that sort of message at this time kind of goes in one ear and out the other for a lot of people.
Yep.
They like go, oh yeah, all the great messages, stuff like that. And then when you turn to, let's say Bradshaw, I want to talk about Bradshaw at this point in time. So, oh, I hate this cunt so much. Like he pisses me off so badly. So he compares these attacks to the events of the Holocaust. He infers that the attackers had a religious motive, even though he doesn't know for certain at this point in time, because of course, like, he knows everything. Says that any the critics of the WWF running this show at this point in time can go straight to hell. Said that he'd readily give his life away for the USA, and I'd be totally down with him doing that. And he talks about how George W. Bush is a great president. Says that this is the phrase that I really want to get across, because he says they'll turn whatever country hiding the perpetrators of this event into a stinking parking lot. What?
I mean, they tried, but,
Like I say, I understand emotions are running high, but fucking hell. Like, and this gets a huge pop, obviously, because everyone in Texas is probably because everyone in Texas probably like got their guns by the side anyway, just in case they see someone with a turban walking past outside the building.
Yeah, that's you just perfectly described the post 9/11 world in one sentence.
Edge talks about like him questioning in himself whether this show was the right thing to do, but then expresses the idea that their job as WWF superstars is to put smiles on people's faces and try and get them to forget about the tragedy with a bit of entertainment, which I think is a
Doesn't
perfect
it suck?
Across.
But isn't that rhetoric that we put smiles on people's faces? Like, I can't hear that phrase anymore without just like rolling my eyes because it's been so overused.
Yeah, I think at this time it was appropriate. I know they overutilize it now, but for this situation at the very least, I think wrestling is meant to be seen as an escape from the things that happen in real life, which is why it was so short-sighted of them to do a debate between Scott Steiner and Chris Nowinski a couple of years later about how the Iraq War was a good thing, because no one goes to wrestling wanting to talk about the Iraq War. They want to escape this stuff.
I think Nowinski just wanted to see if he could get some legs in the political world, and Steiner just wanted to do some math for people.
Kurt Angle talks about how all the heroes, the true American heroes out there, are the firemen, nurses, policemen, doctors, volunteers, all the people that have helped support the effort to try and rescue people and deal with the damage and everything along those lines, which is the message to send across.
Yeah, perfect.
Lita, I think Lita's one, when I was listening to it, I think she's trying to say something that's really profound, but she's very vacuous. And I don't know whether this is about her personality in general, but she's always struck me as someone who thinks that she's saying something that's more profound than it actually is. And it just comes across as a load of words that she's stringing together. Like she talks about,
yeah, I can see that.
Like she talks about how whenever anything goes wrong for her, the first step is to take a deep breath. It's like, okay, thanks, Lita. That's really helpful.
Of course it was.
I mean, she's not saying anything, like, nothing she's saying is bad or anything like that. I just thought, like, when I was just listening, I just thought, was along the lines of thinking, yeah, you probably should have just said condolences to all the families of the people that suffered this, and we will get through this, and just left it there, but she tried to be a bit philosophical about the whole thing.
Which is fine. Everybody wanted to try to use their platform to say something meaningful.
True. I want to talk about The Rock's one, because The Rock's is incredible, because I've never, ever in my life seen The Rock so struck for words. He was stuttering, he was stammering, he didn't really know how to... And I know this is a tragic situation, I don't blame him at all for this thing, but for somebody who's got such a way with words and can talk his way through any situation, The Rock was dumbfounded. He didn't know how to react, to even process this information.
Yeah, I think as we've grown, we've seen that The Rock is a very emotionally driven guy, and this probably took a lot of energy out of him, to see this tragedy and to try to go on TV and be The Rock was probably something that he didn't have in him,
No. I mean, he had it when he came out to the actual show itself, because that was him in pure entertainment mode. But when he had to talk seriously about it, I just think the emotion got the better of him, which is totally understandable.
It's a good speech.
Oh, yeah. I want to talk about the more, I guess, right-wing, gun-toting opinions. We've already talked about Bradshaw. Michael Hayes talking about how Americans will fight and die for their freedom. Says he can't wait for whoever's responsible for his actions, to get what's coming to them.
I'm comfortable with that. It's a little more It's a little less graphic than the Bradshaw. Let's turn him into a parking lot.
Well, then we move straight on to Taz, obviously a New York resident. Talks about how he claims that the claims that America have said that the people who like perpetrated this action will be brought to justice is a load of crap, and instead they should be brought down to their knees.
Oof.
Because I think from what I'm gathering from from the stuff that he does on Tough Enough and these sort of speech, I think Taz is desperately trying to get over with the backstage people, and they're just looking at him saying, "Yeah, but you're short still, so why don't you go commentate instead?"
That sucks.
T-Von Dudley, of all people, talks about how the attackers are probably hate-filled and jealous of America, of how screwed up their own countries are, and they don't have and they are attacking America because they don't have the freedom that the US people have, which I think is not really accurate, if I'm being honest. I think that there is a more religious-driven motive to it, and I think they do attack America beyond the signs of not so much for their freedom, but for their, I guess, blasphemy almost, because they are free and they do things that they not so much things they want to do, but it's against like the code of conduct that these fundamentalists believe in.
Yeah, they don't like that. If in America, if you want to, you can walk around as scantily clad as you please. Basic things like that drive, extremists crazy.
Yeah, and we should point out that it's like you can go scantily clad because you can also cover up as much as you want as well. You have the freedom to do whatever you want, essentially. That should be the attitude. And then Farouk talking about how it's about time we show these cowards that the USA means business, that type of thing. Steve Austin was pretty similar as well. Talks about how people responsible get they hopefully get the payback that's coming their way. Crowd obviously cheering huge for all this stuff. And then we get to the one that I was waiting for the most.
Oh yeah,
Stephanie McMahon. Stephanie's never good in these situations. She's always great for someone to put your foot right in your mouth and feel like you're saying something important, and you're realizing how self-centered someone can really be. Because all I've heard about Stephanie McMahon, like behind the scenes, is she's an angel, she's a sweetheart, everything along those lines. I don't discount that at all. I've never met her, so I don't know the attitude, and I'll only go by what other people have said. But this is a very self-centered, trying to get our family over type attitude that really this event didn't need.
I think now I'm gonna try in the onset to color what she said in a positive light. I think she was trying to say she has experienced a time of great attack, and she knows that humans have it in them to be strong. But what came out was not that. What came out was, hey government, remember when you tried to take my father down? That's what these terrorists are trying to do to America, and that didn't work for you, and it's not going to work for them.
Yeah, essentially
Unbelievable.
I know. Essentially, she comes out and says several years ago, the government came after my family and they attacked our freedoms and our rights, and that's exactly the exact same thing that the terrorists are doing when they flew a couple of planes into a building and killed hundreds upon thousands of people. You airheaded person. I don't want to attack too much, because like you say, I think what she's saying, her intentions are pure, but what she says is so self-centered.
It's a very self-centered mindset. It's like a McMahon-centric universe.
Yeah,
exactly. And I wonder if Vince was even like, Steph, what the fuck? Why did you say that?
I'm sure plenty of people were after hearing that. It was just, yeah, again, it's the emotion of the event, that type of thing, that even still, like, as time has moved on and you go back and watch this thing, it just really reeks of ego, really.
Yeah.
This is 2001's version of philanthropy is the new marketing, that type of like.
And we're far enough removed from the tragedy that now you can look at it in a bubble and just go, what the fuck are you saying?
Exactly.
You compared 9/11, which changed the way we live, to the fact that the government was a little mad at your daddy.
Yeah, it definitely does not age well, and like, to be fair, that aged about as well as like milk does when it's left out of the fridge. Just
It's so bad.
yeah, a piss poor attempt of delivering sympathy by Stephanie McMahon there.
Shout out to WWE Network for not taking this off your network.
Hey, if they're not taking any like chair shots to the head out of any of their shows to like show that they were trying to protect against concussions, they're not taking this shit out either.
Well, you know what? That I can at least say there's too many of them to take out. But this is a very isolated incident where you could just like, I think we'll leave this one off the airing of the September 11th attacks.
Yeah, as this podcast proves, it's a very isolated incident that you can pick out and go to town on. Let's move on now to talk about some of the reheated tags. We'll dip into like a few news stories. We won't go into too much detail. There wasn't really a huge amount for September, but there's a few little things to whet the appetite. So in September, Toronto was named as the host for WrestleMania 18, and the Toronto Sky Dome obviously previously hosted WrestleMania 6 as well, so came back as well. What do you think about the choice of Toronto?
I can't believe they haven't gone back for WrestleMania.
Do they have any big enough like super stadiums for this type of thing?
Well, I know the Sky Dome name is now gone and it's called the Rogers Center, but I think that works. That's a good venue. I have no idea why they haven't gone back to Canada at least. I thought this was a great Mania. This is one of my first, like, really sat down and enjoyed this WrestleMania as a spectacle.
I mean, they've seemed more recently to be contained in the New York, Florida, Louisiana type areas, Texas.
I'll be honest, I hate the way they do it now. Because now it's like, it's not just about WrestleMania. It's about where can we go that's a destination city that we can do a whole week of major events, and it's always the same 5 or 6 places. And I think that's unfair, especially for a company whose the first W in WWE stands for World, and no other place in the world in the last 20 years has gotten a WrestleMania outside of the United States.
So there was kind of a lukewarm reception to this announcement of WrestleMania coming to Toronto, because a lot of people were still pretty bummed out with the fact that Toronto missed out on the 2002 Olympic Games, which ended up going to Sydney, Australia.
Huh.
So they kind of felt this was a poor substitute for missing out on the Olympics. So, I mean, take it as you will, really.
Are you suggesting that WrestleMania is not on par with the Olympics?
Well, I don't think anything the Olympic Games produced got as big a reaction as The Rock versus Hulk Hogan did.
Yeah, so there you go.
So, but I think by the time WrestleMania 18 happened, it was out of the memory. I think they were just a bit upset, or they weren't too keen on Toronto's politicians at that point in time. So this was just seen as like, oh, we'll try and take your minds off how shitty a government we are by giving you WrestleMania. That's cool, right? And people just, not really buying it. We mentioned earlier about Rock versus Austin, how that would have maybe been on the SmackDown episode. They actually had their first match against each other since The Rock returned from filming his movies on a house show in Dallas to try and test the waters, essentially, with this. So, and this marked the first ever time that the WWF and WCW World Champions ever faced off in a one-on-one match.
And of course it's these two, because who else would it be?
No, it's absolutely. It was actually billed as a title unification match on the house show in order to try and obviously attract people. And, of course, it ended in a disqualification when the Dudleys interfered and Angle and Rock came out to take them all out. So, Yeah, good for shit finishes on house shows.
Right. And I think I'm surprised that we never got another Rock in Austin. Because if they wanted to, that could have been the main event of 18, and I don't think anybody would have batted an eye. Before you realized, well, the NWO is coming in and Triple H, that could have easily been the main event, and nobody would have said a thing.
No, absolutely. Want to talk about a bit of a bullying story, I guess. Billy Silverman, a pretty long-standing WCW referee, left the WWF in September of 2001 due to hazing by people in the locker room. Who do you think was the ringmaster for this hazing?
If I had to guess, now I'm not like an expert, but I'm gonna go with Bradshaw.
You give this guy a medal or like a trophy or something because he somehow managed to pick the absolute lead bullier of the entire
Oh
history of
my!
WWF as the person responsible for Billy Silverman leading the company. So talk about the idea of him being ribbed by Bradshaw and a few other wrestlers because he chose to upgrade himself to first class on a flight from one town to another. So
Shut up.
no, that was apparently the reason. The idea of him saying,
That's
"Oh,
so
it's
fucking dumb. I'm
oh la
sorry.
di da, is business class not good enough for you? You had to go to first class instead." And so he was coerced by wrestlers after this to he has to buy them beers all the time to make like as a make
Why?
good
What
for
the
this
fuck?
act.
See, this is where I get pissed off because wrestling is such a stupid animal. Like, oh, you flew first class and I'm mad about it, so you gotta buy the boys beers. It's like, what? That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
After leaving the company, Silverman gave a interview with Get in the Ring Radio in 2001, which was transcripted onto Reddit in 2017 about a story that he'd heard about what JBL had done with Charles Robinson. So it was the idea that essentially he was coerced Robinson to carry a large amount of liquor for him across the Canadian border, like threatening him with like beating him up if he wouldn't do it, and then Robinson would injure his back carrying these bottles for JBL on a frequent basis, and then having to pour the drinks for the boys. Yeah, so essentially he would like have to carry this stuff around for them. He went to management to complain about it, but they essentially told him to shut up and get on with it because JBL was the quote unquote chief of police for the WWF locker room, and everyone was just familiar with the fact that he was a bully and a fucked up human being, and they didn't care.
Huh.
Pretty standard.
Well, yeah.
As we've come to know with JBL, this is just par for the course for him.
What else would you really expect?
Uh, hopefully a firing at some point, but that never came about.
No.
No. So talk about a few other bits and pieces. Mick Foley was apparently, it was reported in September 2001 that Mick Foley was originally intended to come into WCW as its commissioner before the alliance formed, and once the alliance turned heel, it felt a bit wrong for Mick Foley to take on a heel persona because he'd been such a beloved babyface.
Well, that makes sense.
Sean O'Hare was involved in a crowd fight. It's
No.
always a good little story for these ones. So Sean O'Hare was attending a reality super fighting MMA show, and there was a fight that took place in the crowd, like close by him, and he got involved. He didn't instigate the fight, but he ended up getting involved because people were fighting in his general vicinity. So I don't know if he was trying to break stuff up or he was just getting involved in the melee. But there was a fighter outside the ring, like watching the show as well, like an amateur fighter, and Sean O'Hare ended up getting choked unconscious by this guy.
Yeah, I mean, you don't say. And he loses the fight too. Well, he must be the star pick.
Well, yeah, I mean, you would have to imagine that, like in Bill Watts' days or people like that, that he would have been, if they'd have found out that he'd been choked out this way, that he would have just gotten his marching orders immediately. Thankfully, we live in a world where you don't exactly have to be like the toughest SOB outside the ring to be able to carry on as a wrestler inside the ring.
Wow.
talk about this one. There's a few other humorous stories. Randy Savage was suing his former girlfriend Stephanie Bellars, uh, who's better known for her WCW days as Gorgeous George.
Oh, I didn't know that they were an item.
No, that's the reason why, because Randy Savage owned the rights to the Gorgeous George names, and there was the story that he was originally going to give it to his brother Lanny Poffo, because he was signed with WCW at the time, and he would essentially come in as Savage's manager, using the Gorgeous George name, but instead he gave it to his stripper girlfriend, who came in
Wait,
as...
hold on. So, Randy Savage was going to give the Gorgeous George name to Lanny Poffo. Like, does he own Gorgeous George? Like, as in...
Yeah, he owned the trademark to the name. He'd bought the rights from the name from, I think, Gorgeous George's widow.
That's wild.
I know. So it's like, was it Michael Jackson owned the rights to the Beatles albums?
Oh, yes, that is true.
So obviously, whenever the Beatles music was used, it was Michael Jackson getting paid for it. So it's that sort of thing. That's one of these weird situations where somebody takes something that's so iconic in their genre and purchase it for themselves and is able to use it for their own gain.
That's so wild.
So instead, he gave it to his girlfriend, Savage, like for a few months after they'd been on TV for a while with the is it Team Macho Madness, that type of thing, with where it was Randy Savage, Gorgeous George, Medusa, and
Molly Holly.
Yeah. As a collective, Savage soon left the company or just was off TV for a long time. He broke up with Stephanie Bellars, but she decided to use the name Gorgeous George for a porn video.
Of course she did.
As a chance to, like, obviously get more attention because of the Gorgeous George name, and so he was suing her because he didn't exactly sign the rights to the name over. He just allowed her to use that name, but he still owned the rights for it. So just a little, just a lesson that Randy Savage hopefully learned after doing that. Just be careful who you give your name to.
Wow.
Plans were put in place to do the XWF tapings. Are you familiar with the XWF?
Only a little bit.
So, Excitement Wrestling Federation with an X at the start of it because, they're cool.
Because 2001.
Yeah. So there had been long-term negotiations, on and off negotiations between Hulk Hogan and Universal about launching a wrestling promotion. But this was still backed by Universal, but instead of Hulk Hogan, who was involved with a few other bits and pieces and was injured at the time, so couldn't really take too much of a step forward, it would be led by Jimmy Hart and Brian Knobbs of the Nasty Boys. Would be the two people, like, behind the scenes leading the company.
Because of course it would. Why wouldn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
What? So, I mean, I know that the XWF did have Hogan, because that's why I'm familiar with them.
Yeah, he appeared in one match for them, which wasn't even on a recorded one. It was a dark match between him and Kurt Hennig, which appeared on one of the Hulk Hogan's DVDs that he released for the WWF in the early 2000s. Yeah, so you can see it. I haven't actually watched it myself, but I have watched the volumes that they released for the XWF, because they released them on like DVDs, where you have Jimmy Hart and Brian Knobbs introducing all of this stuff and talking about how the XWF could have been something big if they'd have gotten more backing or support. So their tapings for these episodes took place in November of 2001. So maybe in that month we do a little just review and look into what the XWF was, just to give a little bit more context. But just so you're aware right now.
That's funny, man.
I didn't actually mention this as part of the SmackDown episode, 13th episode, but I might as well mention at this point that in a New York Times interview, Linda McMahon talked about the events of 9/11 and how there would be some changes to WWF as a result to it. So Raw would no longer be referred to as Raw is War. It would be, and they wouldn't have the War Zone or anything like that. It would just be called Raw going forward.
This is correct.
Mm-hmm. That was as a direct response to that, and also a direct response was to change the name of the original name for the December pay-per-view of Armageddon. So Armageddon, it's funny because Armageddon was the final show for I think both 99 and 2000, and then it's not in 2001, and then it's back in 2002 for a few years afterwards. So they just decided to take a break for a year, and instead it was the first time the Vengeance name was used.
Yeah, I never thought about that, but that makes a lot of sense.
And one final thing from we're both Japan New Japan watchers, so we decided we'd maybe just throw every now and again a couple of Japanese stories. We only got the one here, which is Scott Hall decided. Scott Hall has always been a guy who's willing to do a job for basically everyone as long as he gets paid.
Yes.
He's that kind of guy. So he in September of 2001 did a job in I think it was either a one-on-one match, it might have been a tag team match, to a very young up-and-coming Hiroshi Tanahashi. So 18 years ago, Tanahashi got his first big win against Scott Hall.
Well, what does that say to you?
It says to me that Scott Hall was using that opportunity to get a few props backstage, and also that they saw something in Tanahashi as a star going forward.
And Scott Hall knows talent. That's what that says to me.
Yeah, I think he wanted it to be like that 1, 2, 3 kid type moment with Tanahashi.
And I mean, it worked out a lot better for Tanahashi than it did Sean Waltman.
Yeah, you can probably say that. So that's the end of our Reheated Tags. Again, just a few little bits and pieces because we've got a lot of shows to cover because we're moving on right now to Unforgiven 2001. Unforgiven 2001, September 23rd, 2001, from the Mellon Arena in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And we all know what Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania means. It means Kurt Angle's coming home with some gold.
That's right. And that means a lot of ECW chants. And more support for Rob Van Dam than typical.
Yeah. So 350,000 boys, a steep fall from 2000s by a rate of 605,000. Although that's a little misleading because the Unforgiven 2000 was Steve Austin's return from a year-long neck injury to find the person that attacked him with the car, and not finding out on that night, funnily enough.
Who was that again?
I can't remember. I think it was somebody who did it for The Rock.
I don't know who it was, but he definitely did it for The Rock.
Yeah. And the people.
That's right.
But kick off untraditionally for a non-WrestleMania show with Jennifer Holliday performing America the Beautiful. Obviously,
untraditionally for a non-WrestleMania show, but very traditionally for a post 9/11 show.
Yeah, they're still on that big kick, I guess, really, and there's still a lot of patriotic appearances and stuff along those lines in this show. And I guess it's still understandable. It's still only 12 days after the event this happened, so I think that's fair enough. So a pretty basic opening video package. It was just talking about the two main world title matches. Nothing really too exciting. Obviously, Paul Heyman and Jim Ross on the call.
Great team. I thought they had good chemistry this night. They were really just sniping back and forth at each other.
I think Jim Ross, especially in the main event, was on his A game for this night. Because he does that long spiel at the end that he usually does when there's a monumental event that's happened. So he was always very good at that side of things. So the night opens up with a fatal four-way elimination tag team match for the WWF World Tag Team Championships. The Dudleys defending against the Hardy Boys, the Hurricane and Lance Storm, and the Big Show and Spike Dudley. So pretty clear who the two actual tag teams in this one were.
Yeah, Big Show and Spike Dudley, totally for the win. All day.
It's actually quite funny because throughout the month, Big Show and Spike Dudley keep teaming up, and Spike Dudley starts wearing a Big Show singlet to the ring instead, which just didn't work for him at all. I also quite think that the Hurricane and Lance Storm were tag team just because one of them's called the Hurricane and the other one's surname is Storm.
Yeah, that's probably why they were doing it at the time.
Yeah. So, Heyman really likes the Hurricane. He was such a big mark for the Hurricane. It's almost like he was the one that suggested the idea.
He probably liked Shane, and wanted to see him succeed.
Mm. JR talks about Big Show, says Big Show wants a tag as badly as he wants a cheeseburger. Jim Ross, because he was obviously the head of talent relations at that time, always used to throw in these little remarks to people to try and get them thinking about like their weight or their performance and stuff along those lines. So I just thought that's funny, yeah. So Hurricane for the first elimination goes on a choke slam for the Big Show, but is battered away immediately, and then Show catches Storm with a choke slam from midair for his first elimination. I mean, the match itself is pretty fast-paced and does pretty well. I think Hurricane and Lance Storm are a pretty solid tag team, but obviously they weren't going to win the titles here.
Well, yeah, I can see them working together more often, and we saw a lot of shuffled together teams at that time. You know, we ended up seeing
in that time
Christian and Lance Storm. I mean, like, this is the beginning of, all right, we're not doing tag teams anymore. We're just gonna do, you know, we're gonna put random guys together and see if they stick.
I feel it's quite interesting that it was Matt Hardy who eliminated Spike Dudley, like a WWF guy eliminating another WWF guy. I know obviously it's all for the titles, but it's just a bit odd.
Yeah, but like you said, it's all for the titles, and they were getting to the point of like, all right, we got to start winding this down. Let's get back into one united WWF.
So they had went down to the Dudleys against the Hardys. There was a We Want Table chance, because of course there was. I thought it was quite interesting that Jeff Hardy was the one who was getting the heat, and it was Matt Hardy that got the hot tag. Just seems, at that point in time, Jeff Hardy was usually the hot tag guy for that team.
But I think they were getting Matt ready to be a more sound technical guy. Like, it was getting clear that Jeff was this reckless dude who was gonna fly off anything, and maybe Matt had a little more of a head on his shoulders.
Well, funny enough, Matt Hardy decided that when he did receive the hot tag to hit a moonsault from the top rope to the outside on top of both Dudleys.
Just shit on everything I just said. Go right ahead.
I just wanted to bring it up a little bit. There's very few opportunities I get for that type of things. We had there was a 3D on Matt Hardy, but Jeff broke it up with a Swanton Bomb eventually, so the referee had to kind of just wait a little while for Jeff Hardy to get in position to hit that. Like, that's always those sort of things are always so good in like in concept, but they very rarely work because the person's just not in position at the right time. And then Bubba hits the Bubba Bomb on Matt when Teddy Long's getting Jeff out of the ring, and Devon just covers Matt straight after. Just makes me think, well, why didn't you just pin him off the 3D?
Because we're telling stories here, Cal.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it was a fun, fast-paced opener. Nothing super special, but definitely good to warm the crowd up, really.
Yeah. It was better than the other tag match we got in this.
Oh, well, yeah, we'll definitely get onto that side of things. We go backstage, RVD runs into Stephanie McMahon. Stephanie offers her quote-unquote services to help RVD beat Jericho.
For the first time in the evening.
Exactly. RVD says he appreciates the offer, but he just wants a dressing room that's big enough to contain his superstar status, and Stephanie says to just go find the biggest one that he can find.
He also said that it's a one-man show, and I wonder if, like you said with that stupid Charles Robinson hazing and the hazing of the other WCW ref,
Billy Silverman.
Billy Silverman. I wonder if they're like, RVD doesn't want to make out with Stephanie? Like, how dare he not want to make out with my daughter? Okay, he's not gonna be my world champion anytime soon.
It's actually quite funny because I've seen like obviously during the Triple H, Kurt Angle and Stephanie McMahon storyline, Triple H at one point when Kurt Angle's saying that he just wants to be friends with Stephanie, Triple H says, "What straight man would only want to be friends with Stephanie McMahon?"
Can you imagine that kind of rhetoric in today's landscape? Oh, what do you mean? I'd love
him to use it against the Velveteen Dream or something, and he just goes like, "Yeah," just goes, "Whatever, dude." And then he just starts touching Triple H on the chest or whatever, and the crowd just going crazy because we don't live in a world where gay people are seen as secondary citizens or anything along those lines, or less than men.
Yeah, like how dare Rob Van Dam not want to make out with my married daughter?
Yeah, and Michael Cole interviews Kurt Angle's found it ringside, and I kind of fast forward it because I don't like cringe humor because this was just cringy from the get go. You just knew it wasn't going to end well. I think
Yeah.
I kind of gathered from that Kurt Angle's mother doesn't watch a lot of him wrestling or doesn't really get WWF, which I guess is totally fine, really.
Do you blame him?
Nah, not really. We're the weird ones. Well, speaking of weird ones, this match was decided to go on to the Unforgiven card, Raven against Perry Saturn. So, story of this one is that Raven and Terry had left Perry Saturn at this point in time and gone to become Raven's girlfriend. They stole Moppy from Perry Saturn and
Not Moppy.
fed her into a wood chipper. Moppy was a
Yeah.
mop, I should say. It wasn't a human being. So
Moppy wasn't just a mop. Moppy was the mop.
yeah, you hear about like wrestlers having to work with a broom. Well, Perry Saturn did it with a mop.
You're damn right.
So Gerald brings a nice touch of the fact that these two were WCW Tag Team Champions at one point. So that's just like an interesting little tidbit for people that were interested at that point in time.
Yeah, they were getting into like we're gonna tell stories of, Rob Van Dam was the longest reigning television champion and things like that.
So this isn't a bad match. You can tell both guys are working hard and trying to put on a good match, but the crowd doesn't give a shit, so it really takes it out away from the atmosphere. And to be fair, I can't exactly blame them. This isn't the strongest feud they could possibly have put on to the show.
Yeah, it really wasn't.
Saturn got busted open under his left eye, and this started a weird trend of people getting busted open pretty unintentionally, I thought. Like, there was a lot of
Dude,
people
there
bleeding from
was
weird situations.
I think Edge got the exact same cut, and Christian in that match is just bleeding from the nose or mouth. Like,
yeah, I think Austin gets a cut as well, like by his cheek or his head or something along those lines that I don't think was intentional either. So just a weird.
Wrestling is real, Callum.
Yep, it's totally dangerous. It's definitely dangerous. Anyway, so Saturn catapults Raven into the corner and then hits his swinging fisherman neck breaker to win the match. So yeah, I can't say it was a bad match, but it just wasn't pay-per-view standard. So we have a Christian interview with Lillian Garcia backstage talking about how winning the IC title will be worth severing ties with his own brother. So this was one of the big storylines leading into Unforgiven, was Christian turning his back on Edge after like a long time as a tag team. Now they're going their separate ways. Christian has new ring music. He has a new like cocky demeanor about him. He still has elements of the totally reek of awesomeness character, and he still wears those stupid glasses to the ring.
Yeah, that stood out to me.
But what do you think about the Christian operatic entrance and the pyro coming down from the top?
The pyro was too cool for him.
I think that was the point, really.
And the theme song, to this day, is the funniest theme song I've ever heard. Christian, at last you're on your own. Like, who did this? Who said, we're gonna make it seem like he's the second coming because he's the furthest thing from it. That's funny.
I just think it's pretty. It's a pretty cool thing for him because it really fits with his character of being such a attention-seeking whore.
What?
Well, yeah, I was gonna go. Well, you summed it up in one word that I had to cover for free, really. But
and he looks like a hat on a hat on a hat with these bug-eyed sunglasses, the weird mesh top, which I never understood. Like, he looks so much better when he just gets rid of the top altogether and cuts his hair. And I'm not usually a fan of long-haired dudes cutting their hair, but with Christian, it just works.
Yeah, I think this was really what he needed to separate himself from Edge. I'm trying to like dig out maybe some of the lyrics because I know the lyrics are sung in Latin or Italian. I can't remember the actual thing, but yeah, I think it's Italian afterwards. But it just talks about how he's going to take over. The world is mine now. Where it just goes El mundo, el mundo, el mundo, el mundo es mío. That's basically saying the world is mine. So
That's so wild. And this is a guy who was gonna be repackaged as the fucking creepy little bastard. Like, what? What?
well,
Wrestling is weird, man.
I think Christian's gimmick was a guy who's trying to be cool who isn't, and so he was doing everything he could possibly do what he thought made him look cool. So I think it worked for his character. And then also we see Edge's debut of the Sinister Surge entrance theme, which I have no idea what the lyrics are for, because it just
Never Gonna Stop Me?
yeah, because it just goes. What is the first thing they say? Because I always picture it as I'm in my Durango.
Yeah, my Durango number 95.
I don't know what that it was. Durango.
Honestly, I don't know. I will say that even though I love the Metalingus theme, I think this just fucking worked. I loved Edge coming out to Rob Zombie.
So I'm trying to think. So a Durango 95 is like some sort of supercar, essentially.
Rob Zombie is oddly into supercars.
Yeah, so I guess like he was singing about how this guy is in his Durango driving around the place.
But this was very much in the days of the WWF just taking licensed theme song, licensed music, and just bam, X Factor now comes out to Uncle Cracker. Why? Because that's why.
So this is like
I thought it was good.
Yeah, it was one of the first like real one-on-one matches between these two in WWF. I think they'd wrestled before, but as a tag team.
Not a good one. I didn't like it.
You didn't like this match?
No.
I don't think it was anything particularly special. It was okay. I thought it was solid, but not spectacular.
I've only seen 3 of their matches, which is this one, the one we'll talk about next month, and the one at Rebellion, which I don't know if we're going to cover, but I think honestly my favorite one was the one at Rebellion in the cage.
Well, it makes sense because that was the third match, I believe, of theirs. So that's the one they've had the most practice in. I don't think it was particularly super special. Somehow Edge manages to get a cut under his left eye performing a bridging German suplex on Christian, which I don't know how you possibly do.
The mesh cut his face open.
Oh, wow. Yeah, probably. You had like Christian hit his own spear on Edge for a 2 count at one point. It's good the crowd is actually getting behind Edge as a babyface now, because when we looked at like the stuff with King of the Ring, he just wasn't there with the crowd at that point in time.
Well, so, I think because it was a weird spot for him to be in, you know?
Yeah, he was very, very fresh off being a heel, so that's understandable. So Christian brings in 2 chairs to deliver a concerto, but Edge escapes, and then he plans to do his own one, but the referee stops him from hitting it, and Christian takes the other chair, hits him with a low blow, and then immediately covers him to win the title. That low blow was really weak. It was a really weak finish. And yeah. Christian somehow got a bloody lip, I think, when Edge banged his head against the chair to set him up for the concerto. He just busted his lip open.
Wrestling is real.
Yeah. But to be fair, even though that match wasn't the greatest, it was a step above what the next match was, which was Brothers of Destruction, Kane and The Undertaker against Chronic. We have to talk about Chronic in WWF.
Theoretically, there's no reason that this shouldn't have worked.
Well, I can think of 2 reasons. Actually, I can think of 3 reasons why this couldn't work.
Is it Steven Richards, Brian Clark, and Brian Adams?
No, actually, Steven Richards is a positive. It's Brian Clark, Brian Adams, and a 2001 Undertaker. It's just, yeah. Undertaker's like shit in this year. Like, he's had one good match, and that's with Triple H WrestleMania 17. And a lot of that was due to Triple H selling so much for her. But Chronic debuted.
Big Dog Undertaker sucks.
So Chronic debuted on the September 4th edition of SmackDown to attack the Undertaker. So the story is that Steven Richards is angry with the Undertaker because Undertaker was the one that caused Right to Center to split up, like all the way back.
What did he tell him? He told him, "Stop worrying about fighting the good fight and find a good woman."
Oh yeah, something along those lines. Because Undertaker's a badass. Like, he's such a badass at this point in time. You know, beating people up and fucking all the women, and yeah, just I hate this character. And yes, they come in. They obviously were multi-time WCW tag team champions. They're under Steven Richards' direction now. And Undertaker cuts promo backstage talking about how people want to forget about right to censor, which is funny because I want to forget about this entire run of your career. Like, it's just. And questions how they're at now. They're staring into the eye of the dragon. Like, shut the fuck up and just go away. Just why isn't he the dead man again at this point? Just it's funny because he turns heel in like 2001, and then that's actually that Undertaker I can really get on board with. But this
Yeah,
Undertaker as a babyface is just, just sucks so bad.
it's almost like I'm not comparing the Undertaker to the Miz, but I'm just saying Miz is better as a heel, and every time they turn him face, he's shit. That's a badass Undertaker. When he was a heel from December of '01 to like July or August of 2002, that's one of the most fun runs of the Undertaker's career. His babyface run following, hate it.
Yeah, both babyface runs like from 2000 to 2001 to like from the 2002 to about 2003, that type of thing. That was just poor Undertaker stuff.
Like, it's good because it allowed him to sell.
Yeah,
You know,
and it meant when the character came back as a dead man, it was fresh and it was more exciting.
and
So I
then it became, okay, you're like a real mythical being now, you know?
so it served its purpose, but it doesn't mean that we have to enjoy what that purpose was.
And it just didn't. It was the beginning of like a lot of things that I don't like now, where it's like you're muddling things up with the character. It's like, oh, I'm not really a dead guy. I'm just some guy from Texas. Here's my wife, Sarah. I'm not a fan of stuff like that.
So this match is widely regarded as one of the worst pay-per-view matches in WWF history. After watching it, I can't go that far. I've seen a lot worse matches.
I
It's not
agree.
great. It still sucks, and there's a lot of things that are bad about it, and they were completely both teams were on the same not on the same page. But there's been a lot worse since.
And these guys were friends. I just don't understand where the miscommunication came in.
Yeah, no, Undertaker is like part of the reason why they got signed is because Undertaker and Bryan Adams go so far back. But yeah, there was just a few bits and pieces where at one point Clark does a spinning like roundhouse kick in the corner on Kane, but it just basically is just his ass hitting Kane's face.
Yeah, that's effective.
Kane, of all people in this match, like does a shoulder breaker on Clark, which doesn't even really connect at all. He just essentially just drops him across his leg. There's some miscommunication between Undertaker and Bryan Adams when Undertaker comes off the ropes and they just stand there awkwardly for a second, just like, what do we do? And then they just start punching each other. Undertaker throws a punch that isn't even in the same zip code as Adams was in, just like misses by a mile. There was this. I think the funniest spot was Undertaker goes to throw Adams into the turn and the ring post, and Adams just walks around it. just like okay, yeah, don't really feel like taking this bump today. I'll just walk past it.
Ah,
Yeah, it's just like a lot of messy brawls. Undertaker and Kane dominate the final few minutes because of course they do. Undertaker then chokeslams Clark and gets the victory.
that's understandable that they didn't bother trying to have him powerbomb one of the two guys. What do you think of the last ride as a finisher?
I think I mean, it's a strong move. It's definitely an upgrade on a traditional powerbomb. I can't. I think the most impressive thing for me about that move is how Undertaker manages to land everyone flat on their back when you seem to be in that much out of control. Like how more people didn't get hurt, like Jimmy hurt taking that move surprises me in a good way, obviously. But yeah, it was
Why do you
just
think he stopped? Like, after that badass run, he never hit the last ride properly again. Like, it always seemed a lot weaker
I think
whenever he went for the last ride.
I just think he became a lot weaker. It was the unfortunate way of doing it. It just got too old to the point where, and the Tombstone was now firmly established back as his main finisher, and the Hell's Gate was his submission finisher. He didn't need the Last Ride to be that like dominant or impressive a move. So
Definitely one of my favorite takes on the character in terms of he has so many ways to beat you, and he can legitimately beat you with any of them.
So, following this match, obviously you have Steven Richards gets beaten up by Kane and the Undertaker as well, so that's something to add on to it. So Chronic, due to the match's poor quality, would talk to Jim Ross afterwards, like I think on the Raw afterwards, and were told that they were going to be moved to one of WWE's development territories, either the Heartland Wrestling Alliance or to OVW. And they essentially refused and were released.
I don't blame them for refusing. Crush at this point is what, 10 years past his first run as a WWF Tag Team Champion? How are you going to tell me, well, I think it would help if you go to developmental?
But does that not, I guess, sign their death warrant in terms of professional wrestling?
It did.
Yeah.
But I think they're better off, just because, again, even Adam Baum, who was with the company almost 10 years before, it's like, how were you not doing more with these guys when you know very well what they're capable of? How did they get one shot at the dance and then it's like, oh, well, that was shitty. Well, so we'll see you later.
I think part of the reason, and you can fully disagree with me if you want to, I thought for a guy of Bryan Adams' experience, he never got good.
That's fair.
I think he was always, whether it was like as Crush or as Bryan Adams and Chronic, other Crush, like whether it was in Demolition or as the Hawaiian guy, he never got really good. He was always sloppy. And I think Clark was the better of the two of them, but even he wasn't amazing. I just don't think the team needed fine tuning. And I think they potentially could have come back after a short stint in developmental. If they didn't want to do it, that's totally their prerogative. I didn't see any. I was totally on WWE's side of things when they decided to let these guys go.
I just think it's wild because it's like you had those guys for many years beforehand.
So we move on past that one to Booker T and Shane McMahon discussing the match backstage. Taz, for some reason, interrupts because Taz was the whipping boy for the Alliance when Sean Stasiak wasn't available. And so he just basically talks about it and says that, hey, if Stephanie pinned The Rock in a handicap match the previous week, then if you don't beat him, that would be pretty sad. And it's just like, they were just trying to get Taz to be kicked out of the Alliance, essentially.
Yeah. I feel bad for Taz. I feel like Taz is a guy who, in today's wrestling, where, a guy the size of Tyler Bate is believable, Taz could have done better today, but he was just so short. And that just wasn't going to fly in 2000, 2001.
So we have the segment that I think you alluded to a little bit earlier with Stephanie McMahon going to RVD's dressing room and talking through the door, says that tomorrow's her birthday and that the best present for her would be him destroying Chris Jericho in their match. And says if he does that, his experience in the Alliance will be a very pleasurable one.
Oh, and are you going to make it a happy birthday for me? It's like, God, if I could just fast forward to her being the queen of all virtue and saying women are strong and beautiful and empowered. It's just like, here you are just being the rich whore on television. And what an amazing thing. And then Jericho to say to her, how old are you going to be? 37, 38? And she goes, I'm going to be 25. And he goes, no, I asked how old you were, not how many men you've been with in the last week. And it's like, my God.
Yeah, it's very much stuff that wouldn't fly in 2019.
And not only that, but it's like, all right, China's finally in the Hall of Fame, God bless. But Triple H once said, I don't want my kids to Google China and have certain things come up. Shit, I wouldn't want your kids watching the network and hearing what people had to say about their mother. Like, wow.
Yeah, so like you say, Jericho approaches Stephanie from behind as she's essentially mouth-fucking RVD's dressing room door. And just takes the piss out of her for sleeping with so many guys before her birthday and stuff like that. Says that she's the absolute breast, that type of shit.
Oh no, it was, we're gonna have let's throw you a birthday party. I'll bring the party favors, I'll bring the cake, I'll bring the balloons. No, you've got the balloons. But what I'm trying to say is, I just want to wish you the breast of luck. It's like, wow.
Yeah, very, 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 I mean, this is how you get over in 2001.
But to that credit, we just experienced in September of 2019 an episode of Raw with a segment with Maria that was very, very much could fit in to this time period. So maybe what's old is new again.
Mm. Well, Heyman is in charge again and doing creative stuff behind the scenes.
That is true. Oh, by the way, JR, because coming out of this, they cut to Rob Van Dam's music, and JR is just really letting Heyman have it over that "wish you the best of luck" line. Oh, it's so funny. Heyman, isn't that funny?
The match itself, RVD versus Chris Jericho for the Hardcore Championship. RVD gets a huge reaction. Like, he is the more popular of the two guys in this match, which I think, like you said, maybe come down to the fact that they are in Pennsylvania, like just a stone's throw away from Philadelphia, so very much an ECW-centric audience.
And Jericho, to his credit, played into that immediately. As soon as he heard, okay, Van Dam's more over than me, he started raking his eyes. He started, really trying to play the heel, almost. And I like it.
What do you think about Chris Jericho's mutton chops at this point in time in his career?
So, I think from 2001 to 2003, this kind of Jericho is always going to be how I view him in one form or another. But looking back on it, yeah, those mutton chops are weird.
I know he's a guy who constantly wants to innovate and change his look, but I mean, he's gonna get it wrong a couple of times.
Yeah,
and I think this is one of those situations.
And I think it got a lot better when he was like clean shaven towards WrestleMania, but then he just like completely clean.
Yeah, I think that was better. So this match is pretty good. It's a good mixture of actual wrestling and the hardcore stuff. To be fair, most of the hardcore stuff involves a ladder, so it's pretty much a ladder match where you don't grab the title from the top.
Which was a very ECW thing.
There was this funny situation where Jericho wants to do this, that sort of chain wrestling thing that he became pretty synonymous with doing with Shawn Michaels when Shawn Michaels came back, of doing these backslides and bridging out of pins and stuff along those lines. So he was doing that with RVD, and at one point he goes to do it with like a load of like pin attempts with RVD, where you sit up from a sunset flip position, keep reversing and doing that side of things, and the referee just wasn't paying attention, so he was having to shout at the referee to cover. And funny enough, that referee was Tim White, and so Jericho kept this knowledge and like close to his chest, and then ended his career inside Hell in a Cell a couple of months later.
You know what? Wow. First of all, Chris holds a grudge. But yeah, he's also the kind of guy who is not above yelling at a referee to get their shit together.
So yeah, I definitely saw that with the Charles Robinson thing with Neville.
Yeah.
So yeah, they were, in terms of that was just like a few little hiccups in the early going, but the match itself was pretty good. Suplexes onto the ladder. You do Jericho throwing a steel chair to the head of RVD while he's on top of a ladder, and then forming the walls of Jericho across the ladder like he would do in those. I think it was the first time he did it was in that match with Chris Benoit that we saw at the start of the year.
What a great match that was. And by the way, this match too, very underrated, I think. Great match. I know today it's probably a pretty standard affair, but like great wrestling match for its time.
I think this is the first and only time I ever saw Jericho use a Fujiwara armbar as like a legitimate attempt at getting a submission.
Well, that is like number 1 through 12 of the 2004 holds.
Oh yeah, it's all the armbars, yeah. Just Stephanie runs down towards the end when Jericho's beating RVD repeatedly with a steel chair to distract him. Jericho swings with the steel chair towards Stephanie. She manages to avoid. RVD connects with the Van Daminator, then hits the frog splash and pins Jericho to get the victory. So yeah, good match, distraction finish, but yeah, it was a pretty good showing for both guys.
I wish that the Jericho-Stephanie angle would have had a better payoff. Because like they finally became business partners, but they never played on it whether or not there was any lingering sexual tension between the two, or just like letting Jericho finally just end Stephanie, or vice versa.
I think what you're seeing there is a good example of Triple H's paranoia.
Yeah, well, I said that Jericho had the idea, and Hunter was just like, yeah, no, you're not doing that. You're not.
So
do you blame him though?
Well, considering both for how what Stephanie McMahon looks like she's a very attractive lady and the power that she wields in the company, I definitely can't blame Triple H for that situation.
Yeah.
Move on to a backstage talk with Booker T doing his 6-time WCW champion pose, and Shane tells him to get ahead in the game. Whichever one of us wins, the only thing that's important is the title comes back to the Alliance. And then he does his own WCW champion announcement. Just like, okay, so we're working together, but we actually just both want to be the champion, and we're not going to let the other person win it.
This was the end of their relationship, right?
Pretty much. This is really the end of Booker T being a really dominant mainstay in the Alliance team. The focus shifted
Well, he
onto...
still makes it to the Survivor Series team, and that I consider to be a landmark.
Yeah. I think it was along the lines of he was the top WCW guy they still had left, because when we get to the Survivor Series, it's 3 WWF guys, an ECW guy, and a WCW guy on the supposed big WCW ECW team.
Yeah, fell off the wagon real quick. But I like Shane as a manager. You know, he had done something similar in the year 2000 with Benoit, and I really thought like these relationships were good for him. You know, I thought they were able to showcase his chicken shit heel tendencies without having to have him overexpose himself as he would do several times this year.
Well, yeah, we got to see that here with him being involved in the match, because it's The Rock against Booker T and Shane McMahon in a handicap match for the WWE Championship. Whoever scores the pin would be the WCW champion. And it's quite funny that Jim Ross talks about how it'd be bad. Traditionalists would find it tough to swallow if Shane McMahon was to win the WWE Championship, joining the illustrious names in that book, including David Arquette and Vince Russo.
JR is the man.
But we have a few like interesting stuff. Shane diving off the guardrail onto the Rock on the outside, because Shane is a daredevil. Shane. Yeah, and Shane super powerful. Shane keeps trying to like illegally interfere to cut off the Rock. Nick Patrick obviously showing his incompetence and his allegiance to WCW side of things. Got Shane hitting the Rock with a belt, but instead he tries to hit the Rock with a belt and then hits Booker T instead, and then hits the Rock with a belt, even though it's was not seen as a no DQ match. The referee's not disqualifying him because it's Nick Patrick.
Boy, Nick Patrick, how did he keep his job for all those years?
I think they just liked. I think by that point he was just a gimmick.
Yeah.
They just like the fact that his gimmick was that he's an incompetent referee.
And he's a crooked ref. He's like, well, he was the guy with the NWO, and he's the guy with the Alliance.
So Shane attempts the people's elbow after nipping up from a clothesline from the Rock, and then Rock cuts him off by nipping up and just fighting him, and then he attempts the people's elbow on Booker T, but Test interferes. So this is where it gets into full blown, this is too much territory. So what happens is, I'll try and break it all down. So Test interferes, takes out the Rock on the outside. Bradshaw comes down to chase Test right through the crowd, so with a lead pipe. So Patrick drags the Rock back into the ring to try and get the cover, but Rock kicks out. Mike Chioda comes out to essentially fight Nick Patrick and stop Shane McMahon from winning the title. Chioda kicks Patrick out of the ring, and then Booker T knocks Mike Chioda out of the ring. Booker goes to the bookend, Rock reverses into his own rock bottom, Earl Hebner sprints down to the ring and counts to 3 for himself. Total
I like that Hebner gets put over in the end, though.
Yeah. Well, I think it's funny because I think they talked about a story in the weeks afterwards that Earl Hebner was the one that carried the pin for both the WCW and the WWF title changes.
Right, because they do end up getting on Hebner about the later title match.
Yeah. So they just talk about the idea of Hebner being biased against the Alliance, and he's actually the one being fair, where the WWE referees are the ones that are crooked and always working on their own team's favour.
Well, this brings up an interesting question. Do you miss referees like that? Like, I know Aubrey Edwards is getting a lot of praise right now for being a great ref, and I think well-deserved, but Earl Hebner was like a very important referee. If Hebner was in the match, you knew some theatrics could occur with the referee and it would be believable. Whereas now, I don't feel like there's that relationship with the referees anymore.
I like it's quite interesting because there's two different ways of looking at it. I do appreciate referees being characters in their own rights and having their own personalities and thoughts and being able to add a little bit to the matches they're in. But I also appreciate the fact that it's like in a sports analogy, when referees are doing well, you're not paying attention to them. It's that sort
Yeah.
of thing. Like the very best referees are the ones you don't notice for the entire match.
Well, I'll agree with that, but I also think it's a shame that like we don't know the referees' names anymore. So we're not ignoring the referees because they're doing their job well. We don't know them. They're just anybody with a striped shirt on, basically.
Yeah, I can sympathise with that position. This match though was completely overblown with interference, gimmicks, all that stuff. It didn't need to be as convoluted as it was, but this is pretty much a mainstay in 2001. I mean, when we talked about the was it the Undertaker Stone Cold match with all those interferences back in Judgment Day, this is pretty standard.
Yeah, well, I'll be honest, September 2001, we are knee deep in the God, I wish we were talking about 2002 instead portion of the year because the rest of the year just isn't that exciting.
No, but stick around anyway to watch the rest of the stuff.
Yeah, that doesn't mean that you should stop listening.
We're excited.
So we're
super excited.
We're excited.
We're excited about all this stuff, even if the stuff we're watching isn't as exciting.
We're excited about being able to review it from hindsight.
Exactly. Almost feels like I should throw a plug in there. Like, if you want us to review other stuff that maybe is even more exciting than the rest of 2001, then why not donate to the Patreon? You can select a tier from our Patreon on Smark Out Moment and choose what you want us to review. Essentially, I think it's the $50 tier.
Yes,
it is. One.
Yeah. We just experienced that over on the Fanboys Anonymous side of things, where Guest 5 donated up to a certain tier, and he wanted Tony and I to do a review of Batman versus the Ninja Turtles, so we did. That fan track is up on the Fanboys Anonymous YouTube. So over here, if you want to see the same kind of things in the Smark Out Moment side of things, you can just hit up that Patreon, and every dollar helps. And we'll throw out some more plugs as we get closer to wrapping this thing up.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, don't have to resort to the $50. Any amount is enough. Is a good motivator for us to explore new ideas, put some new content together, keep the lights on here at Smark Out Moment. So, and if you've got any other spare change thrown around and you want something tangible to go with it, then hit up the Redbubble or TeePublic shops, buy some Smark Out Moment merchandise.
Yeah. You want some shower curtains that say Smark Out Moment on them? Well, guess what? They have them for you over at Redbubble and teepublic.com/Smark Out Moment.
Because you want to see our branding when you're in the shower. It's the best time of the day.
Yeah, yes, you do.
We have Tajiri and William Regal backstage. Tori Wilson comes in and says that she wants to be in Tajiri's corner for the match with Rhino. Regal agrees because those two like each other. Is this really the best they had for Tori Wilson at this point in her run?
I still don't understand how Tori got in the Hall of Fame before some of the other wrestling women from that era. As I go back and watch it now, it's so clear that they were just like, well, she's just the prettiest thing, and she's the epitome of what you want a pretty girl to be. She's the girl next door. And really, she's just your standard, all-American blonde.
Well, speaking of all-American blondes, we have Stacey Keebler at the World, who just rubs a man's face and says how much she enjoys a clean shave, and then talks about how the fact that she's had a clean shave as well, and obviously what innuendos that suggests, and then they move on to a video clip of her in the bath shaving her legs.
Well, you think they serve
2001.
Pie at the World? You think they serve pie at the World?
Well, as long as there's no strudel going around, you know what I'm saying, Rob, because,
Oh, well, I can guarantee you, in New York City, if you wanted strudel, there was plenty of places for you to go. But wow,
you're not a man. You're not a real man if you go after that stuff. You want pie instead, don't you, Rob?
Yeah, pie's always better than strudel.
Just titillation for the sake of titillation.
Speaking of tits, Tori Wilson.
Well, we move on to the United States Championship match. Tajiri defending the United States Championship against Rhino. Tajiri was so good in the ring. A really explosive character. Yeah, really explosive. We've waxed lyrical about how good he was in terms of how dynamic personality in the ring he was. And Rhino's great as well, especially at this point in time in his career.
Rhino, also tremendously underrated. If there was any two guys that should have actually been given a real shot at things, it's Rhino and Rob Van Dam from the ECW side.
Unfortunately, that doesn't fly too much for the crowd because there is definitely an audible "We Want Puppies" chant halfway through the match because Tori's out there.
Because 2001 and Tori's out there. You know, there are those who will comment today on YouTube videos or on Twitter. Wouldn't it be great if we could just see the type of bra and panties match stuff? But like we're so far removed from all that that I can't believe people are just like, show us your tits, show us your tits. It's just like it's wild that people used to do this.
I mean, what I say to those people is either go back and watch the old stuff where that stuff was happening quite frequently, or porn. There's porn. Yeah, there's plenty of porn out there to keep you interested. There's plenty of stuff on other TV shows and movies where people are doing whatever. So let's just leave wrestling the way that it is because wrestling's fine. Just
I think wrestling has never been better, especially for the women right now.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter because boobs and stuff. We should see boobs. That's what we want, Rob.
Yeah. God, I hate wrestling fans.
So the funniest part of this match is Tori goes to try and protect Tajiri, and so Rhino has to chase after her, and he has to pretend that he can't catch up with her, despite the fact that Tori is running in 6-inch heels. It's like stumbling around the ring to try and stay away from Rhino. She runs into the ring, she falls over, and Rhino intimates that he's going to gore her, but Tajiri stops him with a kick to the face, which I thought was a nice spot. But it leads to Tajiri missing his buzzsaw kick towards the end. He eats a belly-to-belly suplex, and Rhino hits the gore to win the US title.
When they finally fully get together, her and Tajiri, don't they almost immediately turn it into a thing where, well, his Japanese culture wants her covered up at all times, and she's the all-American girl, so she's gonna strip.
Yeah, it's pretty much. I think they stay pretty close for the early 2002 period. I think it's around about the WrestleMania time when Tajiri wins the Cruiserweight title that he starts becoming domineering over her and doesn't want her exposing her body. And it leads to, if I remember correctly, it was a match with the Hurricane where Tori distracts Tajiri by taking her kimono off and wearing lingerie because, 2002.
I only know it's the Hurricane because right after that, he starts the angle with Nydia Noble, who, because again, 2002, Nydia was just like, well, I just want to thank you because you're so good in bed, Hurricane. There's a lot of sexual content in these early WWF shows.
Well, let's leave that behind us for now because we've got a main event to talk about, which is Steve Austin defending the WWF Championship against Kurt Angle. So,
a lot of people really love this match.
You were saying that as if you don't love this match.
I don't like screwy finishes. And again, benefit of hindsight, I've grown to realize that I just can't stand watching Stone Cold in 01.
That's fair enough. I think the reason for the screwjob finish is, as Kurt Angle discussed on an interview that he gave back in 2015, I believe, he talks about how his title win in Unforgiven wasn't exactly planned, but it was done as a direct response to what happened on the events of September the 11th.
What? The American hero has come home and conquered.
Yeah, exactly. So the original plan, at least by Angle's idea, was that Austin was going to win this match and just screw out and go over in his hometown, get even more heat, and then eventually would end up dropping the title somewhere down the road to The Rock, because The Rock was there. But the idea was that Angle suggested and Vince McMahon agreed with the idea and thought it was a good idea that Angle should win the title because he's the real American hero. America needs a bit of a pick me up at this point in time. It's in his hometown. This would be a great moment for everybody. And Angle had to call up Austin, see if Austin would agree to it, and Austin did agree to it. So they did the screwjob finish, as we'll get to while we're discussing it, to make sure that Austin could immediately get a rematch, and because he reclaimed the title, I think 2 weeks after this.
Austin won the WWF Championship, I believe, 5 times.
6, I believe.
But I know at least 3 of them, if not more, were all on an episode of Raw.
Yeah, he defeated. I'm trying to recall. So he defeated Kane for the title on Raw.
Yeah,
He
then
defeated the
Undertaker a
Undertaker.
year later.
Yeah,
Then
and he
Kurt Angle here.
Yeah, and those were his other victories are 2 against The Rock at
Michaels,
WrestleMania and 1 against it.
There we go.
He's only ever won the WWF Championship on Raw or at WrestleMania.
No wonder he's the biggest WWE superstar of all time. All of his major moments are on either Raw or WrestleMania. Wow.
So I thought this match was as good, if not better, than their match at SummerSlam.
They had special chemistry. It's almost like, I don't want to compare him too much to his time with Brett, but it has that vibe to it, where the technical wrestler who stands up for what's good is gonna beat the crap out of this brawler guy who just drinks a lot of beer.
The main thing I took away from this match is I got the impression of Kurt Angle was doing a cosplay Steve Austin in this match.
Yeah.
He was dominating, he was beating him up. He wasn't even using many of his suplexes. He was mainly just attacking Austin with punches and chops and forearms and all that other stuff. It was much more of a brawling style than Angle had demonstrated in his previous time in the company.
But I think everybody goes through this kind of like main event growth spurt where they suddenly just adapt wild brawling, because Hunter went through it, you know, as we said, Stone Cold Steve Austin did as well, and Kurt Angle here, I think this time period isn't his best, but it's definitely instrumental in the wrestling machine that we would come to see later, and him bringing that main event style to the years beyond, like the 2006 run in WWF and TNA. And, you know, I think this match might have been the most important in the growth of Kurt Angle.
So one of the nice spots I wanted to talk about earlier they did, which is subtle but it's really well told, and JR tells it well on commentary, is that Austin goes to do the kick to the gut, but he's reluctant to do it because he's worried about getting his ankle picked and falling into the ankle lock. So he just hesitates and doesn't kick him, and Angle is able to take advantage of that. So I think that's a really nice detail.
It is a good detail. And Austin, again, really masterful at telling stories in the ring.
They did a spot later on where Angle throws Austin off the ramp to the floor because in the build up to this, Austin had thrown Angle off the ramp as a way to injure him. So again, just a nice little detail, just calling back to a previous thing. I wanted to bring this up because they were outside the ring fighting for a very long time. A very long time. In fact, I noted it was such a long time that I decided to do some maths and figure it out how long exactly it was. So they spent a grand total from the time that Angle steps out of the ring to chase after Austin, who's trying to escape with the title, to Austin getting back into the ring, like getting 2 feet back into the ring. It was 6 minutes and 43 seconds.
Oof. Who was the referee for that?
Oh, Hebner.
Earl, you can't count to 10? Like, thank God that they didn't have that Randy Orton Kofi Kingston referee in there.
Yeah. To put this into perspective, let's say a 10 count is 10 seconds as it's supposed to be. That meant that Earl Hebner could have performed 40 10 counts in the time that it took from from both guys being out of the ring to one guy getting back into the ring. It's quite a fierce brawl. At one point, Angle pulls out the concrete, like exposes the concrete under the ring mat, and they both perform backdrops onto the other guy onto it. There's Austin hits a pile driver at one point on Angle after like fighting out for a long time to try and get it in. Angle's always, when Austin takes control, Angle's always fighting from underneath, but he's always in the fight. It's never like a really extended heat segment. Angle's always battling back and trying to get a few shots on Austin. They're both targeting each other's necks quite a lot. I think it's a really good babyface showing.
It's interesting. I'm in my head just going over their rivalry, and when they eventually do turn with the double turn, the people don't even bat an eye as to what was happening just months before, because Angle's super over here, but as soon as Austin's just Austin again, they don't even give a shit.
No. it does go to show that the Angle thing was a good experiment, and it was fine for the time, especially with the events of 9/11 happening. But it wasn't sustainable. He just didn't have that sort of level of connection with the crowd to maintain it for any longer. And also, I think a large part of that is due to the fact that the crowd just, as you say, just wanted Austin to come back and be the old Austin. They didn't want the heel Austin. So as soon as he comes back, nobody else matters. It's Austin's back, and we've got him now. We have Angle hits the stunner at one point for a 2 count, and Austin hits an Angle slam, which is actually, when he performs it, just a backdrop, because I don't think he really got how to hit that move properly.
Well, this is a big thing in the mid-2000s, where guys started just hitting each other with their own moves, especially in these Austin matches. I was never a fan because, as you said here, they rarely get the job done right, and this is an ugly Angle slam.
Yeah. So Austin eventually does go for the stunner, but as he feared early on in the match, Angle does pick the ankle. And this is where the screw job kind of comes into it, because Austin reaches for the ropes. He gets his hand grabbing the apron, so it's under the bottom rope, but not touching the rope. And he taps out with the other hand, and Hebner classes that as the submission. Angle wins the championship.
God, does Earl Hebner do anything right?
No, is he more crooked than Nick Patrick or not? It's like, that's the reason why they had this match, to say, well, who is the most crooked of all the referees. I mean, nothing really beats the screw job. But
No.
This is as close as it gets, I guess, really. So Angle's lifted aloft with his friends and family. You get to see Karen Angle in there in, I guess, happier times for the two of them. So he just lifted aloft. The WWF locker room comes out to celebrate with Angle. The crowd is going crazy because it's his hometown. So it was a nice moment. JR's going really hard on commentary about how monumental this moment is and how much adversity Angle's had to go through, and the title's finally back into the WWF. And it all lasts for a couple of weeks before Angle drops the title back to Stone Cold.
It's funny because his family in the crowd does not really know how to react at first. They're just like, yay! We're, like you can tell that they said, we're going to cut to you. Go nuts. And they're not really going nuts, I guess, because they're too focused on the fact that it's an act. But this is good. This is also the last time Kurt Angle will hold the championship while he has hair.
Yeah.
And as he retired early this year, is this the defining Kurt Angle championship win?
I don't know. I always go with the first one is his defining championship win. I think that's the one that established him. This one, even though it's the big moment in his hometown, in the end of the day, it doesn't amount to anything. It's a title win that's not really his. It's weird. This goes sound so stupid and corny, but it's not his title win. It's America's title win.
But you're right.
He's just the embodiment of America, like winning the championship from the evil Austin before dropping it back. I think the fact that he didn't hold it for very long afterwards just means it doesn't mean as much. I'm trying to think of the other ones, because the one where he beats Big Show isn't that spectacular. And it's all because of Lesnar getting involved anyway. The one where he beats Lesnar for it just feels a bit anticlimactic, even though that triple threat match was great.
I kind of go with that one only because it's like, you kind of like I do with Triple H, where it's like, even though he held the title 14 times, I always go with, yeah, all right, you came back from injury and you won the belt and you're the guy. But Angle, and that's part of his role, is he was never the guy. No. Like, he was the good hand who could also really turn it up and be the guy if you needed to for like a month.
Yeah, funny enough, it seems like the most definitive win that he had for the championship was actually the Battle Royal that he won to become World Heavyweight Champion.
Where the fucking confetti comes down. Yeah. That's what I was thinking too, because that's actually a pretty good run, even though it's only a few months. That match he has with Taker is great, and I think that's the one I'd go with too if I had to go with WWE titles.
So we reached the end of Unforgiven 2001. So overall, it's not a show that I'll go back to too often to try and pick a few bits and pieces up, but I think it was a well wrestled show for the most part, apart from a couple of like lesser entertaining matches that didn't really need to be there. So the Perry Saturn Raven match was nothing special. The Chronic Undertaker Kane match is terrible. I'm not a huge fan of the handicap match, but the rest of the show was pretty good, I thought.
But I think the most telling thing overall is that you can point to every segment or angle on the show, and none of it holds any weight by the time we hit January 1st, 2002.
Yeah, I don't even know if it will hold water by the time we get to the 2000 like our final episode of the 2001 Wrestling Odyssey, because we're really on the closing stretch now, final 3 months. It's been quite a journey so far.
I know. What are we? We're 3/4 of the way in.
Mm.
I've enjoyed this ride as it's let me look back and reflect on things. And the beginning of the year is so hot, and it starts out so good, and it just tanks. Now we're in this kind of dull period where the business is changing because it's a monopoly, and the style is getting a lot more in-ring focused, but the people and that Attitude Era spirit of 99 2000 is as strong as ever, so it's just a weird, awkward, growing pain time for wrestling.
I think it's an indication as much as anything that as much as we can criticize elements of all WWE or AEW or Impact Wrestling or Ring of Honor or anything along those lines, New Japan even, that we need people to support all these different groups and put a
We
lot.
can't have this again.
We can't go back to a one entity wrestling federation thing where if people always associate wrestling and it's always WWE, because this is proving that as soon as that element of war or competitiveness goes away, everything starts to just fall down a level.
Yeah, I can't agree anymore. It's like
that's how important it is that AEW succeeds. That's how important it is that every promotion succeeds to a certain level. But AEW now has the resources to do it, so hopefully they do a good job. Which I'm expecting them to do a good job, but I'm hoping people get on board with it, because there's many people that are just immediately saying they can't do it, and there's many people that say that WWE is going to die off the back of this, or that WWE will just fall by the wayside as a result of this over time. That really the best situation is that there's people that want to watch AEW, there's people that want to watch WWE, there's people that want to watch both and other promotions as well. And
because we need a healthy wrestling industry.
Yeah.
I think that's what this experiment has taught me. Where WrestleMania 17, it's this hot culmination of years and years of war, and finally getting yourself back to where you can run stadiums, and God, they don't. It's like immediately the bloom is off the rose, and I never want to see that again for wrestling.
Well, we're going to move on now to our next episode, which will be in October of 2001. So, again, we'll just look back at some of the reheated tags, what were the news and events taking place that time, which will also include a review of WWF's No Mercy 2001, headlined by, I believe that was headlined by WWF Championship match between Austin, The Rock, and Austin, Kurt Angle, and Rob Van Dam.
Yes.
As well as a match between Chris Jericho and The Rock for the WCW Championship.
That is what I think steals the show.
But we will also look, as I've found this on YouTube, and I think it's worth describing, because we've had a lot of constant WWF shows. We might want to spread our wings a little bit. I almost said the same thing I said on the previous. Spread our wings a little bit. I don't know why my mind is going to that sort of thing. It's going crazy.
It's that 2001 mindset.
Yeah, I know. Just talking about Stephanie McMahon and anything like that, and just that's the immediate thing that pops up. But I want to cover World Wrestling All Stars and their debut show from October of 2001, The Inception.
Why wouldn't it be called The Inception? Once again, it's 2001.
So if those aren't familiar, World Wrestling All Stars was an Australian-based promotion that was originally a brainchild of Vince Russo, but eventually he didn't get involved with it and was actually booked primarily by Jeremy Borash in one of his first major roles in wrestling.
I watched these live. I watched these when they happened.
I feel so bad for you.
Yeah, but you know what? I'll say this. And this is a good reminder for those watching today. When you're a kid and you like wrestling, wrestling is just good. I don't know if adult me is going to have the same take.
So we'll review that as well. So you get 2 show reviews next month, lucky people. But that wraps up an end of this one. So the only thing to do now is to cover a few plugs. So if you've been watching this on YouTube, do leave a comment below. Let us know how you're enjoying the journey so far. If you have any thoughts or feelings about this episode or any other episode, just go back, leave us a little note, and we'll see if we can react to it. See what you're thinking. Want to get a conversation going. If you're listening on the podcast networks, any other platforms where you're listening to us, leave a rating or star rating, comments, anything along those lines if they're available, or come over onto the YouTube side of things, just leave a comment as well. Let us know what your thoughts are. You can also join the Mega Maniacs and join the conversation there as well, where just a group of wrestling fans on Facebook just chatting about stuff that's going on in the world. So check the link to that as well. You could also obviously want to go to the website as well, check out all the articles we've got going out on there. I do the power rankings. Rob has done bits and pieces for the Triple Threat, and even though that's now out of your hands, thankfully, passed on to someone else to take the reins, Ben Guest doing that. But check out all the other weekly stuff and all the other random articles that appear sporadically, as well as the pay-per-view predictions and the beloved heel face turn list.
Oh yeah, you can't miss those heel face turn list.
You can follow me on Twitter, myself at Wingmaster14. You can follow Rob at Dude Felice, Tony Manga, like head honcho here at Smark Out Moment at Tony at a Mango Tree, I should say.
Well, you can follow everything Tony's doing at a Mango Tree.
Oh yeah, but he's
on everything,
Tony
and
Mango.
You can follow Tony Mango
as in Tony and then Mango.
And for me, like Callum said, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Dude Felice. Check out everything I'm doing in the world of wrestling, whether that's on WrestleZone.com with the WrestleZone Daily, whether that's on Fightful.com over the weekends, or whether that's on eWrestling News. I'm always in and around the world of wrestling, as I love these little experiments, and we will see you next time as we go back in time once again.
Absolutely. So, just as a final thing, if you want to help the Patreon or Redbubble, TeePublic, whatever, throw a few bucks our way. We would greatly appreciate it. But we also appreciate you listening, and thanks again for joining us for this other journey back in time to September 2001. And we'll see you next time we go back to 2001 A Wrestling Odyssey. But for now, this has been another Smark Out Moment, and we are being counted out.